What if your DNA could tell you the best diet, best workout, and recovery plan for life? Well, in today's episode, I welcome back Dr. Sam Shay, who was on my show about 2 years ago and has some great news and improvements to his genetic reports from FitGenes USA. He breaks down how genetic testing is changing the future of fitness and longevity. We discuss why your genes may explain why diets never worked, why you recover differently than others, and how a single test can help personalize everything for you from nutrition to the type of exercise you're doing, which might surprise you. The test is very comprehensive and gives you options for real food choices and supplements to help aid you in whatever results your genetics reports come back. So if you're into biohacking and want to stop guessing and start optimizing, this is the first test you should think about doing. Stay tuned. Just a quick reminder, before we dive in, the show is for educational purposes only. Check out the full medical disclaimer in our show notes before making any lifestyle changes. So I keep talking about my SKOOL community that I'm on, and I've grown into about 100 members, and I'm really trying to help out the over 40 crowd, putting a platform out there that's better than Facebook groups. So this is just where I'm spending my time. Once again, check out the show notes for the link, or if you just Google over 40 fitness hacks SKOOL, SKOOL, I will be the first thing that pops up on Google. Hope to see you there. Dr. Sam, just want to thank you for coming on my show again. It's probably been a year since our last episode. We titled 10 Pillars of Health, and I told you I just rewatched it. So it's, all about the looking from the outside in and more so from the inside out with all the different lab testings we have access to now. I think all my audience right now is getting a little more into biohacking. So we talked about testing your hormones, adrenals, sex hormones, mitochondria, a lot of genetic testing. I think today, and I'll put the link into that previous podcast so people can watch that if they're interested. But today I think we have some new stuff on genetic testing that you wanted to update us. So as always, I'll let you kind of do a quick intro on yourself and we'll get into the good stuff. And I think you got some PowerPoint for us as well.
Awesome. All right. So a quick intro. My name's Dr. Sam Shay, DC FMCP. It stands for Functional Medicine Certified Professional with the Institute for Functional Medicine. And my background is that I grew up chronically ill as a child and lots of problems, sleep, digestive, pain. I got Lyme disease. I had really the terrible diet of the 80s, just nothing but SpaghettiOs and ramen noodles and skim milk and, Tropicana orange juice, which is basically sugar plus pesticides in liquid format. And also Folgers coffee. I grew up had a coffee habit when I was 6 years old, simply because I was so exhausted from the insomnia, from a tremendous amount of stress at home and a lot of violence and bullying at school. And I decided in high school that I was going to take control of my life using natural medicine as opposed to Western medicine, because both my parents didn't know anything about nutrition or lifestyle change or anything. I mean, after all, they were both medical doctors and they just didn't understand it, didn't have a paradigm of it. And, like most parents of the 80s, their parenting style was a mixture of SSRIs, TV, and emotional neglect. So that's what made us kids latchkey strong,
Yep.
And I was supposed to be the third generation medical doctor in my family. And instead I took a pivot into natural medicine because what I was dealing with was not appropriate for a emergency care style philosophy, and being medicated into submission as opposed to actually dealing with everything that's going on was not the right strategy for what I had. So I got very heavy into natural medicine. I did pre-med, and then while I was in college with a holistic health practitioner certification on weekends and evenings, got very heavy into breathing techniques and meditation. And I ran an organic kitchen co-op in college, and then went on to chiropractic school, got a functional neurology, a postdoctorate, a diplomate as well, was that for 9 years. Also got an acupuncture degree when I was abroad, and then got very heavy into functional medicine with the Kalish Institute and then the Institute for Functional Medicine. And then the last 10 years, I've been very, very heavy involved in genetics. And the reason why I've cross-trained across so many disciplines is that I was just deeply unwell from just a multitude of things growing up that just all compounded and fed on each other. And I was just uniquely vulnerable to so many different things that seemed like everyone else around me. Like if I ate something that was not really good and everyone else was fine, but I was the one who couldn't sleep and was just exhausted and foggy headed and all the rest of it. And when I got into genetics, I finally got the answers I was looking for. More importantly, as to why, it's to what to do. And that's why I've gone full steam ahead into genetics to the point where I now run a genetics company and help support both the public and practitioners and certified health coaches and certified fitness trainers to bring genetics into their practice and to direct members of the public to their nearest FitGenes certified professional. So company I run is FitGenesUSA.com, FitGenes USA.com. And it's a unique space report in the set of reports in the genetic space, because if people have ever run genetics testing, they've probably experienced the following. You get back a report that's just nothing but hexadecimal hieroglyphic jargon that's overwhelming, confusing, probably a little scary, and not very practical. Or if it's loaded with 300 genes and attending 300 health tips, it's too much information. It's not prioritized, and therefore it's impractical.
Yeah.
So you end up with a report that's overwhelming, confusing, and ultimately paralyzing. And it can lead to a kind of existential fatalism of like, well, I've got a red dot in this, and this, and therefore probably going to die on Tuesday and pass the Twinkies. So it's not very empowering, these other genetics tests, because they're either scaring you or overwhelming you or confusing.
Yeah.
It's one of those three.
And the other issue is, like, my doctor can get me a genetics test. I forgot what company does it, Diagnostic Solutions or Genova.
Almost all of them have some form of it at this point.
Yeah, but the problem is, and I've seen it with, like, I did gut health testing with them, which worked for me, but I've since then gone with a different company who knows what they're doing and can test the information. And that's the problem why I don't want to do it with my doctor, because one, I don't know if he really knows and has lived his life on digesting the info that they put out, or even if that company gives you enough info as well. So that's why I'm more interested in what you got.
Yeah.
So is genetics company something you just started since the last time we talked, or you had already started?
No. The FitGenes has been around since somewhere in the aughts, in the 2000s, and it was started by Dr. Beaver, and he was an engineer originally. And what happened is both of his parents developed cancer, and he switched his engineering genius to genetics because he was concerned about himself, his kids, and his grandkids. So he then went and read, and this is true, over 5,000 genetics articles, and put his engineering genius to work. And what is an engineer? Organizes a set of processes in a predictable order to get predictable outcomes every time. And what he did was that he figured out two key tracks for genetics with several insights underneath each track. First insight is that there's genetics around health, well-being, and longevity in terms of looking at the drivers of chronic illness, and which are the same drivers to look at if you want to optimize. So the difference between Western medicine and functional medicine is the following. Western medicine philosophically brings people from crisis to stability, which is great. That's wonderful. Functional medicine is how people go from chronic to normal to optimal. The tools for functional medicine are not appropriate in the emergency room, just like the tools for the emergency room are not appropriate for getting someone from chronic to normal to optimal. They're great from crisis to stability.
Yeah.
But not the other stuff. And the other stuff is not appropriate for crisis to stability. So the problem is not one medical paradigm compared to the other. The problem is mission creep into the other side of the sandbox of either side. And that's why I'm saying, like, the tools that were offered to me when I was younger were not appropriate for my situation, because I was not dealing with an acute emergency. I was dealing with a chronic, ongoing relentlessness of all this multiplicity of lifestyle issues and circumstances that were beyond my control that were leading me to chronic degeneration, and simply drugging me with SSRIs was not going to solve the externalities that were causing the issues. So it was certainly a form of crisis management for my parents in terms of, well, we've ticked the box on that kid who's having problems, by now he's numbed out. That in their mind, it was a crisis, but it wasn't actually a crisis at all. We needed a different paradigm. So in genetics, you see the same thing. So in Western genetics, there's really four types of genetics tests. There's the medical pathological genetics testing, like, do you have trisomy 21? Do you have Huntington's disease? Do you have, like, these very specific genetic, hard-coded genetic realities that are hardwired? And then you've got another type of genetics testing, which is, what percentage Irish are you? That's genealogy. That's not what we're talking about. Then there's another form of genetics, which is, who's your daddy? That's paternity testing. That's not what we're doing. Then the type of testing we're doing is functional genetics, which is looking at the genes that help you get from chronic to normal to optimal. And we're not testing for the pathology genes. We're not checking for the cancer gene, the diabetes gene, the stroke gene, the dementia gene, the heart disease gene, cancer gene. We're not looking for those genes. Even though Dr. Beaver was deeply concerned about cancer, he wasn't looking for cancer genes. He was looking for, what are the gene clusters above that are higher up above those quote unquote disease genes. And those genes are the genes for, and this will come as a surprise to literally nobody, inflammation. But there's 7 drivers. Inflammation's number 1. And the other insight was that the drivers are in order of priority. It goes genes for inflammation, of which there's about 16. The most important ones, there's actually hundreds of genes are related to inflammation directly, indirectly. But we only want to look at the most important ones upstream. that are actually going to affect the ones downstream. So we look at the upstream genes for number one, inflammation. Number two, the genes that mop up free radicals in the mitochondria, because 95% of the free radicals are generated in the mitochondria. The mitochondria are the electricity factories of the cell. The primary gene is called MNSOD, MNSOD. Just for the Scrabble nerds out there, it stands for manganese superoxide dismutase. Just write it down if you want to run a Scrabble tournament. Otherwise, forget it. It's thinking MNSOD, think of Mr. Sod. Mr. Sod is the head janitor of the mitochondria factory, Mr. Sod. And he is in charge of cleaning up 95% of all the free radicals in your body. Now, Mr. Sod has two brothers, SOD1 and S2. They're in charge of the other 5% everywhere else in the body. But you know what I'm most interested in as a practitioner? The one gene that deals with 95% of the problem. That's what I mean. Prioritization.
Single bullet.
I just like the other 5%. Yes, they're relevant, but 1/20th the relevance. So that's what I mean by prioritization. We're not chasing after all of the genes around free radical damage. That's nutty. Let's look at the most important ones. So we have inflammation, free radical damage scavenging in the mitochondria. That's Mr. Sod and his two subordinates, catalase and glutathione peroxidase. Again, Scrabble nerds, you're welcome. Then the third priority is the liver detox genes. There's about a half dozen of the most important. Then you've got the vitamin D receptor genes, the genes that let you use vitamin D, not merely synthesize it from sunlight. Then it's methylation. So methylation is priority number 5, not 1, despite what Gary Brecka tells you.
Yeah, we talked about that last time.
It's priority 5, not 1. And when I heard Gary on Rogan in December of 24, I was yelling into my podcast player as if he could hear me. And he was so wrong on that thing. Now, his other stuff, I thought it was brilliant. Like his other topics he's talking about, but he's dead wrong on the methylation stuff. And so if you know me, when I get angry, I make a PowerPoint. So I went on to 3 other podcasts. You can Google my name, Dr. Sam Shay, methylation. You'll find the hour plus of me showing my receipts of why methylation is downstream from inflammation and the other drivers. At best, methylation is bidirectional with like liver detox and BDRs. That's it, like maybe. Yeah. And then underneath that is cardiovascular system, and then it's fat energy metabolism. So we've got one branch of genetics analysis, which is where we're looking at the drivers of disease: inflammation, free radicals, liver detox, vitamin D, methylation, cardiovascular, energy metabolism. But so with that, what do you do with that information? So we've prioritized a really small cluster of genes into those categories. But then Dr. Beaver also picked the genes that showed peer-reviewed studies done on humans, not wombats or nematodes, that show which lifestyle changes, diet, exercise, nutrition, etc., alone will shift the expression of the genes to behave more positively to help our lives in modern day times. So instead of giving you 300 health tips, here's like the top 10 that affect the most number of these highest priority genes. Yeah. So I can have out of like the top 40 genes between those 7 different drivers, I could have, let's say 25 of those top 40 genes. It's like a music chart list or something. The top 40 coming down to number 1 is interleukins.
Billboard top.
So the top 40, I could have 25 of those 40 genes have bad versions or yellow and red dots, versions of the genes that are not ideal, that actually are problematic. I would much rather have one lifestyle recommendation so that it attends to 12 of those 25 genes. Yeah. And then the next one is like it affects 10 of them. And the next one is 9. And the next one is also 9. So that way I know I'm picking the fewest number of things that's going to actually affect the most number of highest priority genes. That's what I mean by priorities. So instead of having 300 things, you've got like, here's your top 10. So that was one major category change. The other major category change was on the diet side of things. Mm-hmm. So one of the major discoveries was a single genetics test that is not a 23andMe or Ancestry or other type of test that you commercially available, unless you do a full genome sequencing, which is really expensive and really overwhelming. We're looking at what is called a copy number analysis, which means you're not looking at that version of the gene. You're looking at the number of duplicates of the gene, the number of copies of a specific gene that makes the enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates in the saliva. To understand it visually, pretend your gut is a fort, and then that your carbohydrates are Vikings charging the fort. And if the number of cannons you have lining the fort are the number of copies of this gene making the enzyme to mow down the carbohydrate Vikings. So you can have up to 20 copies or 20 cannons of this gene, which means that the more cannons you have, the more carbs you can mow down. And the fewer number, the fewer you can. So What does this mean practically is that you can now genetically determine, are you keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb? one of the single most important things to figure out if you are concerned about your health, your well-being, and your performance for the short term and long term is what are your macros? What is your genetic paradigm and your parameters and your limitations? Now, for me, before I had this test, I had a perfect organic diet that was Mediterranean, locals, farmers market. I knew the names of my farmers and their chickens. It was like an episode of Portlandia. And I was eating, the equivalent of having the number of cannons or copies of like a 6 or a 7. But when I ran my genetics test, turned out I have a grand total out of 20 possible cannons of 2, only 2 cannons. So I was a very, very, very low carb, or I am a very low carb person. So within 1 week of changing my diet to my genetic reality, I was able to level out the rapidly shifting mood, energy, and digestive issues that were happening on a daily basis throughout the day. So the other main insight on diet, aside from what's your carb tolerance, which is massive, the other insights were what are your food triggers? And then what are your eating behaviors controlled by genetics? So genetically, I had a food trigger where I was genetically sensitive to caffeine. I had caffeine-induced anxiety and depression. Now, for all the people listening who just love their bulletproof coffee or whatever, like I had the most bulletproofy of bulletproof coffee ever. I had like 12 things I put in that thing, and it was very complex, but I was having a mild anxiety attacks, but I was tricking myself into thinking, oh, look, it's energy. Look how energized I am. Look at all my bulletproofiness. No, it was anxiety that then crashed into depression. And I'm just genetically sensitive to caffeine-induced anxiety and depression. And over 10% of the general population is. And I didn't take that seriously until I saw my genetics. I also learned I was histamine intolerant, which means there are certain foods that triggered headaches, foggy brain, indigestion, and it can cause water weight gain for some people, just kind of global itchiness and dysregulation. I also found out that I'm genetically vulnerable to food intolerances. So I went on a much more cleaner elimination diet, not in terms of whether it was organic or not, but I just removed some things that need to help me go on that were just triggering my immune system. And then I also learned that I was so sensitive to inflammation that's why I was chronically ill, that I'm a hyper-inflamer, meaning that I have to live a much more pronounced anti-inflammatory lifestyle because that's why I was so sensitive to everything around me. Then I also learned my exercise genes, which was another major revelation. So you can now determine, are you better suited for sprint-like, endurance-like, or some combination between like of exercise, and also your recovery and risk of injury genes. Some people need to put genetically as much focus on the type of recovery as much as they do the type of exercise. Genetically, some people have very, very weak collagen, like me, and there are more risk of joint injuries. That doesn't mean don't exercise. It means you got to focus on safety and recovery. Some people are more genetically prone to exercise-induced inflammation that can injure the muscles, like me. That doesn't mean don't exercise. It means you have to put more emphasis on recovery. I can walk into any CrossFit gym in the world and look around and know exactly who's a hyperinflamer.
Wow.
How do I know this? Because I look around and I see who's cut and who is strong but has kind of this washed out muscular appearance. The people in there that are strong, but you can't really make out their definition, they're just massively inflamed because they've crossed that line for their genetic capacity to handle inflammation. So they've exercising too much, which CrossFitters are prone to do. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then now their body is retaining water in order to dilute the inflammatory chemicals so that your tissues aren't damaged by these inflammatory chemicals circulating around. And if your body retains water, it's buying the liver and kidneys time to filter the inflammatory chemicals out. And this is why you can see some people that just have this like watery weight, like the more they exercise, the more water weight they gain, which is kind of paradoxical and demoralizing. If they take a week off, suddenly they look better, feel better, and they hit personal records. They're like, well, that doesn't make sense. I stopped exercising. No, it's not that you stopped exercising, it's that you deflamed and you stopped provoking more inflammation because you were over-exercising to begin with. So genetically, if you know that you're an over-inflamer, then you can change your exercise routines so that you are only doing high-intensity interval training like 2, maybe 3 times a week with at least a day or 2 in between, and then focusing on movement, not exercise. I make that distinction. Movement is different from exercise. On the off days, and you focus on recovery, and you'll spend less time in the gym, you'll get injured less, you'll look better, feel better, and be stronger. But you won't know that unless you run your genetics. But if you don't take your genetics, you're just going to be captured by the latest fitness trend that may put your actual health, well-being, and longevity and performance in jeopardy. So the genetics testing is very, very practical. The reports that I've designed, so I joined FitGenes 10 years ago, and now I'm the Western Hemisphere distributor and the international educator, and also the report designer. So I'm like fully involved. And I've designed the reports to make them very, very easy to read for both practitioner and the layperson, that you can look at the report and say like, oh, okay, here's the highest priority thing for my diet. Here's the priority things for my exercise. Here's the top 5 nutrients I need based on my genetics. I can do that.
Yeah.
It's so much easier for a practitioner. It's so much easier for the public.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think you said you had some slides to show. Before we get into that, I remember talking to you last time, the 10 pillars of health, and you were saying, obviously all this testing requires money to get this done. And yes, you should invest in yourself and all that. But I remember you saying last time that if you are going to do one thing, do genetic testing first, and then you can go down the other testing.
Totally.
Within just the genetic testing of everything you just said, like you were mentioning, how your metabolism works with food and exercise seems to be a little bit more important than all the way down to some of the other things that you can learn from genetic testing. Are you able in genetic testing to just do it by section, for people who are looking for cost savings? Or is it just, you just got to do the report?
So the thing about genetics testing, it's actually less expensive to do both reports at the same time, because the data is good for life. And to do section by section, it's from the same swab. Other companies, what they do is that they it's like splitting of items or item splitting. You saw this a lot of electronics. Where they get all your data, but they say, oh, if you want the mood thing, it's going to cost you. Oh, if you want the exercise thing, it's going to cost you. What you want, look, the test that I designed is like, here, how about you just have the genes organized by sections? And so you've got the data, and whatever you want to implement, you can implement.
Yeah.
So right here, we've got the FitGenes genetic blueprint for those that are watching. Here are the sections. I made a table of contents by section that you can click on and fast travel to. Like the quick wins are up front. What are genes is introduction. Then you've got trigger foods, eating behaviors, exercise, immunity, inflammation, cellular defense, methylation, neurotransmitter mood genes, cardiovascular health, fat metabolism, summaries, etc. And even right on page 6, this is an example from a real person. Here is the summary page. Now imagine if genetics reports were like this. Well, mine are. So you've got this person needs to be on this type of diet based on their genetics. Here's the top 5 nutrients based on their genetics. Here's their exercise, their collagen type, their inflammation risk, and then a section on hydration. And so right away, just page 6, I print this, and now I've got a template of what to do right away. This person,
if you want to read nothing else, you can do so much with just page 1 here.
Absolutely. Like this person needs to be on, based on their genetics, an elimination diet that's low histamine, low no coffee, low no alcohol, mindful eating, anti-inflammatory diet, avoiding gluten because of the risk of celiac, and then low salt only if they have existing high blood pressure or water retention. So, and this person is an endurance fiber type, but they've got a real risk of joint injury because of their weak collagen, and that they have a risk of exercise-induced inflammation. So they will do better in more long-distance sports, but they really got to make sure they do things safely and that they do a lot of emphasis on recovery. And then these are the top 5 nutrients that they need based on their genetics. And then the rest of the report is just more of the details. Like this person, like this is the slide on endurance versus speed. So you got the science on the left, the practical implementation on the right. This is their injury risk of collagen and exercise-induced inflammation, and then all the practical stuff on the right. If someone is wondering, well, how do I handle coffee? Well, this is the caffeine slide. So just making it really straightforward. Here's the slide on caffeine. And if people want to have lower and lower amounts of caffeine, there's a chart here of foods that have decreasing amounts of caffeine, and a whole thing of explaining what the different types of paying attention to timing, amount, and quality. Yes, mold in coffee matters. 100% that matters. But some people, it's the caffeine that also screws them up. And if you really want to know about the genes that were tested, then you've got the list of the actual genes that were tested at the end of each section and the mixture of genes that were checked. And the reason that this can convert interpretation time for practitioners down from over 2 hours to even under 20 minutes is because we're not spending our time going over into the details of the serpin B7 gene and the serpin B7/B2 gene. We're not doing that. We're saying, what is your relationship to food allergens as such? And this person has 5 major genes on food allergens. 3 of them are heterozygous yellow dots. And so we just say, like Mr. Johns, your relationship to food allergen risks as a whole is, you can think of yourself as a yellow dot. We don't need to go into all the massive details of all the individual genes. Just what is your relationship as such? You'd be better off trying to do an elimination diet. Right up here, it shows the 4 major genes for histamine intolerance. He's got 2 of them green, 1 red, 1 yellow. And as you can tell, this person is on aggregate, a weighted aggregate average. I'll spare you the algorithm. They're a yellow dot in histamine. Mr. Jones, you are a yellow dot in histamine, which means based on your genetics, it's very likely that you would thrive better on a low histamine diet. And here's the chart that explains it. Oh, and by the way, on page 6, there's an entire link on how to do an antihistamine elimination diet. So we can just start there. So from a layperson, it's like, oh, I mean, I don't have to learn all these genes. I just have to understand where am I on like an aggregate as a weighted average. What's my relationship to this particular function around genetics? And so it makes it so much easier to understand and so much easier to implement.
Well, it has more value. And like I said, I already know the report I would get if I went through my doctor. It'd just be numbers and, 15 pages of
Totally.
just, jargon that I can't even comprehend. So that has more value, I think, to, help people. And like you said, in order, page 1, if you look at nothing else.
Well, technically it's page 6, but
page 6 is the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a 90-page report, but we want the most important stuff up front and then all the details underneath it if people want to dig in, but you have the most important stuff up top. And then on this one, this is the carb choice advanced test. I redesigned this report as well. This is the one around the number of cannons you have to digest your carbohydrates. So you've got the number of cannons lining your fort. This is actually mine. I'm a 2. So this is my results. And the most important thing is a whole discussion on how to actually implement what a lower carb versus moderate carb versus higher carb, et cetera, diet is. And for people, like I even put in an entire page of my keto folk, they're 1s. They've got 1 copy. Paleos are 2 to 4s. I mean, I'm a 2, so I'm kind of like quasi keto in that respect. I do way, way better on a much lower carb diet. 5 to 8s are more Mediterranean, and 9+ cannons, 9+ copies, they're more higher carb. And what I've done is I've included an entire 7-day recipe guides based on what your carbohydrate tolerance is. Beautiful charts to understand what is a higher carb versus a lower carb. Ways to increase, working with the cannon analogy, you've got firing rates. So you can increase and decrease the firing rate of your cannons. Things with citric acid, certain lifestyle habits decrease the firing rate. Things like smoking. Also certain berries decrease the firing rate, which may sound odd, but food is complicated. The polyphenols can suppress amylase production. Doesn't mean they're bad. It just means you have to eat them in a different time than higher carb foods. And then an entire segment on supportive nutrients that can help with carb metabolism. So this report legitimately completely transformed my life. But if I had known my carb tolerance report, my carb number back when I was 6 as opposed to 36, my entire life would have been completely different. If I had my genetics test when I was a child, as opposed to when I was in my mid-30s, my entire life would have been different. I would have been taller. I would have been stronger. I would not have been as chronically sick. I may not have been chronically sick at all. I would have understand why I was being injured because I was exercising for the wrong sport. Like I would have had much less anxiety and depression because I would not have been on the coffee. I would have all these other things. So if people are looking at how to, one, get out of something chronic and into feeling more normal, the genetics test for you. And especially if you want to go from normal to optimal, the genetics test is absolutely for you. And if you just want some place to start, the genetics test is absolutely for you because you run this genetics test once and you have the data for life. You don't have to retest these genes again.
And that's what I think is so important too, is that everything else in health and fitness and wellness, you can change for the most part by doing stuff later in life. It doesn't matter that you didn't start it in your 20s. Your genetics, you were stuck with that since you were born. Yep. So it almost makes sense if you even want to, waste more money, go into biohacking, like my audience is getting more into that kind of stuff, longevity. There really is no point until you start at ground zero and you can start playing with stuff, having all that information at hand. That makes so much more sense.
Yeah. So I recommend people just do their genetics. If they're interested, they can go, if you're a practitioner or a certified health coach or certified fitness professional, you can become a FitGenes certified professional at FitGenesUSA.com. Or if you're just want to get your genes tested, you can also go to FitGenesUSA.com and click find a practitioner and we can connect you to the nearest practitioner.
Well, cool. Well, Dr. Sam, anything else you want to put out there, or your website, how to get a hold of you to start these genetic testings?
Sure. So the website to do genetics testing, you go to FitGenesUSA.com to connect to the nearest practitioner. If you want to chat with me directly, then you just go to drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com. And I also have tons and tons of interviews on YouTube. You can put my name into any podcast player and it'll pop up. And I'm also on Instagram. FitGenes USA is also on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, I appreciate you reaching back out, and this is really cool seeing what an actual report looks like and what it can do for you, and also that snapshot. That's great. Definitely stay in touch. And with all the stuff and AI that's going on, things are going like at light speed right now. So
there's some things that don't change. Your genes are what you're born with, and so what you're wanting to do, like more data, is not necessarily better. Better organized and prioritized and actionable data is better. And the problem of getting all of your genes and then just running them through some AI slop is that the LLM models do not understand this type of prioritization. And they feel like every citation has of equal merit and value, and that you've got, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of genes they're looking at, and then they're trying to comb through tens of thousands of articles. There's not this fundamental understanding of what are the actual most prioritized genes. And it's also like that there's not this filtering around what has been done on humans as opposed to wombats or nematodes. And then there's also the practical element of, you'd really want someone who's been doing this for a decade, who's also been very sick himself, understanding just how critical and important this is, and has gone through the transformation himself using genetics, despite having all of the other training and functional testing, and has worked with people for 10 years, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people for 10 years. And basically, Dr. Beaver was the AI of the times, or it's like he has a brain that basically could absorb the most important papers.
Yeah.
So I would just encourage people to just get their genetics tested and really have that foundation, have that blueprint in place, because all the other biohacky toys and shiny objects, they're useful, but they're only useful if they're useful. Otherwise, you're just hoping that the next shiny object is going to work for you in some way. And genetics is one of the most high value investments you're ever going to make, because what's more valuable, a thing that can help a specific thing, or the map to know what thing to use?
Yeah.
The map is always the most important thing. And that's where genetics comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember talking with you last time that, you can get this genetics report, and you just showed us one that it's so much more comprehensive and user-friendly. Mm-hmm. But then if someone wants to go to the next level and actually get help on each one, then they can reach out to you. And I remember you had one-on-ones and groups and stuff like that. Do you still have that?
So there is a group program that I do run. And so if people are interested in that, they can reach out to drsamshay.com. And there's also just like for the practitioners, like what I'm wanting to do is really empower the practitioners. And so in FitGenes, it's not available for someone to just go and buy off FitGenes USA. It's always through a certified professional, because we want supervision on implementation, because otherwise it just becomes, people can just get lost and misunderstand what's going on. Now, I've tried to make the report as clear as possible, but people still Google themselves into terror anyway. And I really want to make sure that people have some sort of practitioner or certified health coach or whatnot that is helping deliver and implement all these genetics changes.
Yeah. And as far as anyone interested in getting certified, is there prerequisites, like you have to be a chiropractor or a doctor?
You have to have a certification through a legitimate organization. The thing about genetics is that this is not diagnostic. That's why certified health professionals can do this, is because we're not diagnosing anything. We are talking about the science of genes and what the science of these genes imply that is best for the lifestyle from a genetic standpoint. And it doesn't separate out, like, if people need to go get thyroid testing or amino acid testing or stool testing, they should do those things, but that's like a different level of certification and licensure and so on. But genetics is this unique place where we're just talking about probabilities of what can manifest based on your genetic reality. So this is why certified health professionals and certified health coaches can also run genetics, is because we're not diagnosing anything.
Yeah, got it. Well, very cool. As my audience knows, I'll put all those links that we just talked about in the show notes, and check it out. They can also check you out on YouTube and all the millions of different podcast shows I know you've been on as well. But Dr. Sam, just appreciate you for reaching out and your time and all your education.
All right. Thank you so much, Brad, for having me on.
You got it.